Welcome to Food Psych, a podcast about intuitive eating, body positivity, and health at every size. I'm your host, Christy Harrison, and I'm a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and certified intuitive eating counselor specializing in weight-inclusive wellness. Join me as I talk with interesting people from all walks of life about their relationships with food.
I remember I was teething, little gums bleeding, cried every evening, it was all about eating. When I became a teen, it was all about beefing. Now I'm ready for the world, trying to sink my teeth in, stacking it.
Hey there, welcome to episode 97 of Food Psych. I'm your host, Christy Harrison, and today I'm talking with Sumner Brooks, a fellow body positive and health at every size dietitian. She shares how she had a really difficult relationship with food in childhood and what helped her overcome that, including learning the process of intuitive eating and learning to push back against diet culture and the messages that tell us we're not good enough from such a young age. So we got into a really great conversation about all of those influences that so many of us face in society today and what we can do about them. And we also talk a bit about our upcoming collaboration, because I'm a part of Sumner's new EDRD Pro conference that she's putting on for dietitians who want to learn more about health at every size. And I'm so proud and happy to be a part of that conference. So stick around until the end and you'll hear how you can learn more and sign up for it. We are sponsored today by the Plum Deluxe Tea Company, a really amazing small family-owned business out of Portland, Oregon. And not only do they offer delicious fair trade teas made fresh every week, but they also have a really amazing blog and online community where they share really thoughtful content about mindfulness and self-compassion, self-care, and body positivity and other concepts that we're so into here at Food Psych. So if you love trying new teas, treat yourself to a Plum Deluxe Tea of the Month subscription. For only $10 a month, you'll receive a hand-blended, all-organic, loose-leaf tea that's thoughtfully chosen for the season. Tea Club members also enjoy special benefits like discounts, free shipping on all purchases, and access to a very loving and supportive tea community. There's also caffeine-free options available, which is cool because that's one of my nightly rituals, is to have an herbal tea and relax on the couch and watch some TV and eat some candy or cookies or whatever I feel like for dessert. So it's really nice that they have so many options to choose from. You can see them all and sign up for a tea subscription at christyharrison.com/plum. That will redirect you to the Plum Deluxe website. That's christyharrison.com/plum. And by the way, there are no plums in their teas. The name comes from the Old English definition of plum as something that is lucky and unexpected, which is a really sweet representation of their company, I think. So check them out, show them some love, and support the podcast, christyharrison.com/plum. I also want to share a couple great resources for helping you make peace with food. The first is my free quiz to assess if you have a healthy relationship with food, and I'll send you your results via email along with more than a dozen individualized tips to help you make peace with food wherever you may fall on the spectrum right now. You can take the quiz and get your results today at christyharrison.com/quiz. That's christyharrison.com/quiz. The second resource I want to share is my intuitive eating online course. It's a 13-week program that I created to help you work through all the principles of intuitive eating in depth and really demystify and troubleshoot some of the common areas where people tend to get stuck with intuitive eating. So I'll show you how to recognize the diet mentality even in its subtle forms and how to start substituting healthy thoughts instead. I'll share my secrets to making food and exercise choices from a place of self-care rather than a place of self-control. I'll teach you how to navigate emotional eating and how to stop alternating between restricting and overeating, and how to do all of this from a health at every size, body positive, weight neutral perspective. So the course really is designed to help you make peace with not only food, but also your body, learn to accept your body and trust its wisdom to guide you, whatever size you may be, just help you give up the pursuit of weight loss in favor of having a really good relationship with food. And check out what a few of the participants have had to say about this course. I'm so grateful for both the Intuitive Eating Fundamentals course as well as the Food Psych podcast. The course helped give me a community to stay on track towards a shared goal, which is so, so important. This course was extremely well designed and well written. I love the infographics as well as the links to pertinent Food Psych episodes. I also reinforced things that I'm already working on in therapy and in life more broadly. I wouldn't change a thing about the course. That's from participant with initials MM. And then participant JS says, this course has been so helpful. I've learned so much about how the diet mentality and the food police in my head have led me to restrict foods. I've learned about self-compassion and treating myself kindly, and the resources have been so valuable. The Q&A podcasts in which participants can ask questions and get answers from Christy are incredibly helpful. I no longer feel alone in this journey towards peace with food. So if you'd like to join other people on this intuitive eating journey, go to christyharrison.com/course to learn more and sign up. That's christyharrison.com/course. Finally, if you like the podcast and you want to help us reach more people who need to hear the body positive message, you can leave us a great review on iTunes. Just open up iTunes on your computer or the podcast app on your phone, type in Food Psych to the search bar, click on the result that comes up under podcasts, and then go to the ratings and reviews tab, and you can leave your nice rating and review there, telling us what you love about the podcast. I'm always so grateful to get these nice reviews. It totally makes my day when I read them. And they also help bring us up in the ratings so that more people can find these body positive messages. So the ratings and reviews you leave, and if you share the podcast on iTunes with your family and friends, that really helps too. So if you've already left a rating and review, thank you so much. You've made my day before already. And now you can share the podcast with family and friends by clicking on the little 3 dots next to the podcast name in iTunes and then clicking share podcast. And that will really help us get the word out to more people who need to hear these messages. So now, without any further ado, let's go talk to Sumner Brooks. So tell me about your relationship with food growing up.
Sure. So when I think back about my relationship to food, I actually, over the years, have noticed how I had a really distorted relationship to food from a very young age. And the things that really stand out to me looking back are really related to kind of out of control urges I had to binge and to overeat from the time I was a small kid. And I'm thinking around the age of like 6, 7, 8 and onward.
Wow.
Yeah. So of course I didn't know what was going on at all with that. And I was actually surrounded by my loving family, my mom and my dad and 2 older sisters. So I was the youngest of 3 girls. And I also remember that nobody really talked a lot about bodies or about eating directly. Everything was very like indirect as far as talking about nutrition or eating or weight in bodies.
Indirect in what way? Do you think like people commented on other people's bodies outside the family, or?
I think it was like there were comments made, of course, I think from the best of intentions for us to be healthy, but comments made about stopping eating at a certain point or not having seconds, or a lot of like, who finished this? Where did this go? Who ate this? Kind of questioning. And I've talked to my sisters a lot about this, and we definitely had feelings of shame about food, but I have a lot of compassion for where my mom was coming from with this. She grew up in like a food insecure house, and they were very poor and they lived on a farm. And so there was by no means an excess of food ever available. And then as I was growing up, we were in a safe, physically secure, privileged household and had all the access to food that we needed. But I think that was really strange for my mom to have us eating maybe more food than she thought was really appropriate. And so I don't think that she knew how to deal with that.
Yeah, food insecurity can be such a lasting thing. It can really shape your relationship with food for your whole life.
Right. So I know that she, it's like you don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. And she didn't know that she was even doing that or saying things about it. And I think she also truly just believed that you shouldn't finish everything, or you shouldn't have the last bagel, or you shouldn't eat when it's not mealtime. And so that, with a combination of eating for reasons other than hunger, so eating for loneliness or to not feel other feelings or to not feel the boredom, I think was also something that we really experienced. And I say we because I've openly talked, with my sisters about this and how we all sort of shaped our distorted relationships to food from a pretty young age.
Yeah. So you sort of had like a scarcity mindset imposed on you, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah. And then if you combine that with there really wasn't sugar in our house, there wasn't a lot of foods with fat in our house. It was a really like healthy food environment. And I remember also like I would make these concoctions of like sugar and flour and sprinkles and food coloring, like all the things that did have sugar in our house that were ingredients. And I would sort of like put them together alone when no one was around and almost pretend like I was making cookies or something. And I would eat this like disgusting kind of combination of things. And I really think that that was a physiological just need for more variety and more fun foods.
More sweetness.
Yeah.
It's funny. I'm having like such a visceral reaction when you say that because I did that both in childhood, even though we had plenty of sweets and stuff. I think it was more like out of boredom. I was sort of, experimenting in the kitchen because it was an easy way to escape feelings of loneliness and stuff. But then also like fully returned to the concoctions in my eating disorder because I was not allowing myself sweetness. I wasn't allowing myself sugar and cookies and all the things that I allow myself now. And surprise, surprise, no concoctions because that's weird,
Right. It's like amazing how natural that is to just find any way you can to get those things. And then so of course I would go to friends' houses or whenever we were out to eat at a restaurant, that's when I was really binging. And I didn't know I was doing it, but it did feel out of control. But I was kind of vocal about it. So we would have family meals out at a restaurant and I would literally eat to the point where I felt so sick and I was in pain. And I would kind of get teased about it, like jokingly. Again, I'm the youngest child. I was the smallest bodied child. So it was like no one ever really thought that there was anything wrong with what was going on. It kind of was funny in a way.
Yeah. So it wasn't like she has a problem here. It was just kind of normalized.
Never. And I think my mom really probably felt like she was swimming upstream with raising 3 girls, trying to do this from a very health conscious approach, wanting us to be well-fed nutritionally. But it was like the more she tried and the more she was a product of all of the 90s, non-fat, fat-free eating. She was very much, a product of that. And so the more she tried, the more we rebelled and the more weight we gained really as a result of kind of this disordered style of eating when no one was around. So I just have so much understanding that she was a product of diet culture as much as anyone was. And it was within our own house really not working for any of us.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so interesting that never really gets said, right? It's the fact that you were participating in diet culture from a young age probably wasn't on your radar until much later.
Right. And so then I can remember like moving into the early 90s and being like a preteen, but also an athlete. So I started playing soccer really from the age of kindergarten and was always doing something in terms of sports. And so I was really hungry a lot.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking about the foods that we had at home. There was no fat in anything. There was no sugar in anything. And yet here I was like a growing athlete teen who was hungry and not getting satisfied, I don't think, just because of the foods that we had. And then also just like all of this obsession with all of the 17 magazines that were in the house. And I had a circle of friends that I would say was definitely, really focused on looks and appearances and popularity, of course. And that's just such a hard age to be for everyone. But I had no idea that this eating disorder was really kind of festering and growing and really becoming pretty strong by the time I reached my teens. And I just remember being really hungry and then having that natural kind of reaction to binge when no one was around. And I think that's where all the shame started coming in.
Yeah. So it was, you can see now that it was sort of a necessity, but at the time you felt like something was wrong with you for doing it.
Right. And like, I also have really begun to realize how much of an impact this advertising really does have on young women. So like, I remember being obsessed with all of the products, right, in 17 magazine,
Oh
the
my
like
God,
suggested things you had to do. And I would make a list and go to Payless or to the drugstore and buy as many things on this product list as I could and use them all right away. Like put every face mask on and like do every single thing. And then be really disappointed that I looked exactly the same, by the end of the day when I went to bed.
Oh my gosh, yes. This dream of transformation.
Right. So it was, of course, there with all the body image and the thin advertising, but also just with like everything in my life at that point was, I'm not good enough. I don't look good enough. I'll never be good enough. And so it just kind of perpetuated all of it, the feelings of self-hate.
I can so identify with that. I think we're probably around the same age because I had 17 and, was like an early 90s tween as well. And it's so insidious how diet culture and sort of just the message that you're not good enough as you are is woven throughout magazines like that. I don't know what it's like now. I think, is 17 even still around? I think it was up until at least a few years ago, but
I don't know.
I know Teen Vogue is doing some cool things, obviously, with its political reporting, but I don't know what it's like now reading those kinds of magazines. But I just remember having that same experience of like, I'm not good enough as I am. The 90s were a time when like you're supposed to have really straight, sort of thin hair and like tiny eyebrows and no body hair. And I was the exact opposite. I have like wavy, thick hair and big eyebrows and like I'm hairy. And I was just like, I'm the worst. I need to change everything about myself. It's funny because I actually recently stopped plucking my eyebrows at all. And I was like, there's so much more eyebrow here than I ever let myself see for 20 years because of freaking 17. Like,
right.
I
know. I am right there with you with the hair removal. It was like every Nair product and you're like putting yourself through pain and, our poor, just young little hormonal bodies, we had no idea what we were doing. And it was really sad. There was like a lot of real fear and disappointment there for me, at least, with just like, how am I ever going to become a cover model? Like, how am I going to do this?
Right. Because that's what we're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because they presented it in all these different ways. Like I remember sort of being like, well, I don't necessarily want to be the cover model. I want to be like the cool, alternative chick. Like I remember Clueless really got me because there was like the cool girl who was kind of getting a makeover or something. And I was like, I want to be like that girl. I want to retain some of my different qualities, but like also have a closet full of amazing clothes and look perfect and have all these cool friends.
Right. Exactly. I think that's like such a big piece of beyond just food rules and diets and calorie counting, but a huge piece of what's wrong with our disordered eating culture is that we're really set up for failure because these are unrealistic ideals from the very beginning, and we didn't know any better.
I know. And it really does set the stage for disordered eating to come into play, like because it sounds like yours didn't really catch fire or whatever until the teenage years, but probably for years before that, you were absorbing those messages. And that's very much was my experience too. Like I was, throughout high school, didn't really have any disordered eating, but was having tons of self-loathing and body image concern that sort of burst onto the scene in college. And it's like, it's always just sort of lying in wait for you.
Right, right. And then it also just lets us remember how eating disorders are never about the food. It's about, for in my case, the underlying issues were wanting to seek approval and love from all of these places. And for a variety of reasons, I wasn't feeling like I was good enough for love. And so that's something I always try to bring back into my work with patients, is really trying to read between the lines and hear where this came from. We know this is not about the food. So what is it about and how can we heal that?
Yeah. Yeah. It goes so much deeper and there's so many more aspects to it.
Yeah.
Which I think that's why getting interested in feminism and body positivity was such a huge piece of my final stages of recovery and the work that I do with clients, because I think it's important to be able to see all these systemic reasons why we are set up for disordered eating and body shame that have nothing to do with us being broken, right? Like it's actually we're doing what we're told in thinking that we're broken.
Completely. Yeah. Yeah. And then, like, no family system is perfect. No one's food environment is perfect. It's so much more of like a bigger human issue and like a soul issue, in my opinion. Knowing how to be loved and knowing how to love yourself, and then not catching on to or needing to rely on something like an eating disorder to get you through every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did yours end up going there? Did you start sort of relying on it for emotional solace as well?
I kind of made it through my teen years, and I went to an all-girls high school, which I think gave me an unusual environment throughout high school. I can't tell you what would have happened if I'd went to a co-ed high school. I know that I did have, unfortunately, a few close friends who went to the co-ed high school who did unfortunately develop some severe eating disorders. And not that that has anything to do with what school you're going to, but you just never know what path is going to take you where. So I was in an environment that was really relaxed as far as how you had to look when you showed up to school, let's put it that way. And by the time I went to college, I remember getting to the very first day in Colorado at school. My parents drove me from Portland to Boulder, and I made my first friend that day. And the conversation that I remember having with her, we went to Starbucks, and she said, "Okay, Sumner, all we have to do is drink Americanos over ice," and blah, 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 about how we weren't allowed to eat and we'd be fine
Oh, God.
as long as we did that together. And I was like, "What's an Americano?" Like, I don't even know. I don't even know what this girl's talking about, but clearly she thinks I need to lose weight.
Mm.
And so, of course, I was already predisposed in having issues with not eating enough and probably restricting daily. But then that first semester at college, I almost died on my birthday a week later. So I'm an August birthday. And like, it was my 17th birthday, or turning 18, turning 18. So it's the first week of college. I wasn't eating because we weren't supposed to be eating. And we were going through sorority rush. And I went to a party and had not eaten all day, I don't think. And went to a party, had some binge drinking going on, and don't remember anything, and woke up in the hospital.
Oh, no.
And I think it was extreme. And luckily,
Wow.
my roommate called 911 in the middle of the night. So I ended up being okay. But it's just another piece to, like, looking back how extreme this was.
Yeah.
And also, I'm able to see in how many different ways of my life I was binging and shopping, binge drinking, binge eating. So clearly there was something that needed to be addressed that was not just about food.
Yeah. Was that your wake-up call then?
No. Believe it or not, no. It just happened, and I sort of just moved on. I didn't make it very far in school that year. I actually ended up needing to move back home, experienced a lot of depression. And so these are things that I really believe all were related. I wasn't able to form healthy relationships with living this kind of life. And I don't know about you, but that's something that I see a lot with my clients is these big walls are built up and they're just not able to connect with people emotionally.
Yeah, they're keeping people out. I definitely see that a lot too. And I know I did that as well in my eating disorder. Isolating or just being what you think people want you to be and not who you really are.
Right. No sense of actual self at all. And it amazes me that I don't feel like I came into really knowing who I am until I began healing from my eating disorder.
Yeah. So how did that go? Did you end up finding a therapist or a treatment program or?
So I was up and down for years with sort of how extreme the restriction would be or how extreme the binging would be. I came to, unfortunately, it sort of morphed into an exercise bulimia type of situation where the desire to control weight became so strong that every time I binged, I'd have to go to the gym for a certain number of hours or burn a certain number of calories, which was just painful and sad and time consuming and energy draining. And again, sort of keeping me just isolated. I couldn't tell anybody that was going on. As soon as you are exercising for that many hours, you're then going to become very hungry again very soon. And if you're in a restrictive mindset, then that's going to be really difficult and it's going to lead to more binging, right? So everything I was doing was perpetuating the cycle and creating, of course, extreme moodiness and trouble focusing. Ended up moving schools again. Still wasn't happy, still depressed. And I took a nutrition class at U of O that actually was really eye-opening. It was taught by a registered dietitian. And that was the first time that I had heard of a registered dietitian and realized that you could actually have a career in this. So I decided to move schools again. And I moved to San Diego and I took a year off school. And I'd say this is where the peak was for me and by the peak, I mean the worst of my eating disorder. And I think it had to do with extreme loneliness for about a year. I really didn't know anybody. I wasn't in school yet. I was just working 3 different jobs. I was a broke college student, so really couldn't take advantage of a lot of the fun things to do. And so it was just really, really a difficult time. I remember binging on frozen waffles that were still frozen. I remember kind of being in that situation where there was nothing to eat in my house because number one, I didn't have much money. And number two, I didn't want to allow myself to buy anything. So it was very out of control.
Yeah. So your needs weren't getting met and you were just kind of going for whatever was nearby.
Right. Needs were not getting met and going through a lot of difficult times, like emotionally. My parents were going through a divorce. I didn't have anybody to talk to about this. And I also learned a big lesson here that I apply and practice now, which is I was seeing a therapist and my eating never came up once in any sessions. And of course, I don't blame the therapist. I didn't bring that into our work at all. And I don't know if that was like a protective thing where I didn't want anybody to touch that. I didn't want that to go away. I didn't want to work on healing that. But I will now, as I have a professional relationship with someone and working with someone over time, I will address that with them in how is your eating coming up in therapy? And I'm not surprised, but very often my clients will say it never come up. And so I think we have to help guide them to knowing that it's part of their mental health.
Absolutely. That's a really great point because I definitely had that experience too, where I had a couple therapists where my eating never came up and I didn't, well, One of them was it didn't come up for a while, and then people started being worried about me, people in my life, and I brought that up to her, sort of like, isn't that weird? People are worrying about me. I don't know what's wrong with them, And instead of kind of being like, interesting, what's that about? Like, let's explore that further. What do you think of your eating? Which is something that I would hope most therapists would say if that came up. She instead was like, well, you're not that thin, basically. Like, you don't look like you have an eating disorder.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that really shut it down for me. And I didn't bring it up to therapists for a while after that because I was scared and I felt like it was just going to make things worse,
Yeah, you didn't get validated at all for that.
No.
I had sort of a different experience. Finally, one session, I said, I just really hate myself today. I feel so fat. I hate how I feel. And she sort of said, well, what would you think if I told you that people look at you and don't think you're fat at all? And I was like, what is she talking about? And I didn't, it was just like, okay, I don't know, maybe that's possible. But that did get me thinking like, am I being really hard on myself? Or am I seeing myself differently than other people see me?
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So it kind of put the lens on your distortions.
Yeah. And my body never changed too extremely either way. So in my most restrictive phases, actually, I just had a conversation with my sister recently about she thought I never had an issue with food until we went on a family vacation and I was in college. She noticed that I had lost a lot of weight and that every time we were eating out on this family vacation, that I was finding something wrong with my food at every restaurant. And I don't even remember that. And I think that's like, for me, helps me understand more now working with people who are still in a denial phase. This is not intentional. People often do not know how unhealthy their behaviors are.
Right. Yeah, that's a really great insight to have. Because I think that is common, right? A lot of people have years of denial or months of denial before recognizing that their eating is actually causing problems.
Right. And so because my body never got, quote, too much larger or too much smaller than my norm, this just went on for years and years. And as I mentioned, the binge shopping, the binge drinking, the binge eating, the compulsive exercise. And I became an RD. I went through my internship and began counseling, and it was really great. I feel such a blessing that my first job out of my internship was working with bariatric surgery patients as an outpatient dietitian.
Wow.
And I connected with these people immediately. I just wanted to help each and every single person learn how to have peace with food. And I didn't even know that that's what I was doing. But it was almost like through my own feelings and my own need to heal, I could sit with someone else and hear their story and want to help them. But I still hadn't gotten really help on my own until very shortly after that, I read intuitive eating and I began doing Evelyn's teleseminars and then moved into supervision with Elise Resch and have been working with her ever since. She's been an amazing mentor to me. So intuitive eating is absolutely hands down what saved me and changed everything for me.
Wow. That's amazing. What do you think opened you up to discover that? How did you come across it in the first place?
Yeah, I actually went to hear Evelyn speak on a different book of hers, The Ultimate Omega-3 Diet. And I heard her speak and I was just totally enamored with her, and then looked up all her other books and realized, just honestly, it sounds strange, but for as long as I struggled with this, my 180 with food was really very quick. I remember starting to say things to myself like, as soon as when I would walk into the kitchen and maybe have an urge to impulsively eat or to binge eat, to just tell myself, like, you can have whatever you want. You can have whatever you want. You can have whatever you want. And I began to see binging as something that I was doing to myself that really was not kind. And I would say things like, you can eat whatever you want in any way, just eat in a kind way. Just do things that feel good for you. And so, of course, I know that is not, every single person's journey is different. And the amount of time that it takes for every person to make this transition and to heal is very different. So I don't have expectations or that would think that this would be how it is for everyone. But I think that, like, the degree to which I was suffering with the shame and the struggle with being a dietitian and still living this way was just so immense that I think I was really, really ready to absorb intuitive eating and to do whatever I could to help myself.
Yeah, that readiness is so key.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like you would hit diet rock bottom or binge rock bottom and you were ready to try something different.
Definitely. Yeah.
What was it that sort of gave you the idea of kindness? Was that therapy or?
I think it's really the words of Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch. I think their words are vitally important to how people learn to talk to themselves and to treat themselves. I am forever grateful to the work that they've done in teaching me, how to have my own healthy relationship with food. But, those words resonate with me, and I hear their voices, and I have learned how to help coach other people to find, in their own words, what does it mean to be kind to yourself? And what does it mean to feed yourself in a way that feels good for you? And my eating at times was really I describe it as violent because that's how it felt. I was clearly hurting myself with food. I don't know that everybody experiences it that way, but I definitely did.
I think that when you have extreme guilt about eating in general, right? It's like, I definitely had that experience too, and know some clients who've had where there's a biological impulse to eat, and maybe it's very extreme. It's like you want to binge, you want to eat a lot, but then you're also ashamed of that impulse, and the shame creates a sense of badness and like there's something wrong with me for doing this. And so then like the eating becomes a form of punishment because it's like, well, I'm doing this thing that means I'm such a bad person. And then you sort of, that story that you are going into it with makes it so much more than just, oh, I'm really hungry, but like I'm a terrible person for doing this. And maybe it makes you eat more than you actually wanted to in the first place, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just so incredible that we can go through however many years of nutrition education and dietetic internships and not come out of that understanding how eating psychology works and how we have to have this healthy relationship with food to be in a state of well-being or to be in health. And I've heard, on your other podcasts with other guests, dietitians talking about this, that so many of us have this experience of getting into the field from a disordered place. And I think what you're talking about with the story and the guilt and the shame when the eating begins is absolutely what was fueling my binging, was just that I was so bad and I was so out of control and I was such a failure. And, until you really know how to stop that tape, you can't just pause and be curious about what's going on.
Absolutely. Oftentimes too, the like prescribed alternatives to binging or the self-prescribed alternatives really like are just stop it. What are you doing? You're being, like restrict more basically. And these very self-critical, shaming voices that of course just make it even harder to uncover what's really happening and to nourish yourself so that the biological urge to binge is lessened.
Right. All of these tips are really like so many tips are about distracting yourself away from food or, just keep your mind occupied. Don't think about it. Or, in the dieting sense, it's everything you can do to avoid feeling hungry. One of the things I tell people when I'm working with them is that every binge has a message. Every binge has a message. And I know this is true because I know it was what was going on for me. And some of the messaging I would hear would be, if I look back on binges, I think, wow, I was really nervous, or I was really anxious, or I was really needing to get out maybe some anger that I was having. And I didn't grow up, I was never exposed to really being angry or fighting with anyone or yelling or hitting. Like I don't know that I really ever knew how to deal with anger. So I think that that's something that was going on with this violent type of eating, is manifesting maybe some how I needed to deal with feelings of anger or disappointment or frustration. So I ask people to be willing to not distract yourself away from the urge to binge or the urge to eat, but to look for what the message is. What is going on here? Like a little white flag is coming up and being waved. And I ask them to try to stop and think, what is the message? What is going on right now that is really important that I need to hear or pay attention to?
Yes, I love that. I did a version of that with my therapist when I finally found the right therapist that I was able to trust enough and talk to about food. And, she had me sort of pause before and during binges and just ask myself, like, what are you feeling? What do you need? What are you thinking? And I would write these things down. And usually it would be like, I'm hungry and I'm also frustrated, or I'm hungry and I'm also really tired and I have to do all this work and I don't want to, or I'm hungry and whatever. And so we were able to kind of finally piece apart that biological hunger made me vulnerable to this, but that also there was some emotion going on that I was like taking out or acting out in the process of binging too. And that both of those things needed to be addressed and be held in their proper way. So not kind of using food as the means of getting out the emotion, but like, what are some really self-compassionate ways of working with that emotion? And then also, what's a self-compassionate way to deal with the hunger? Well, to eat and to let yourself eat, right?
Totally. Exactly. I describe that as the perfect storm when you have a really intense physiological need for food and you have a really intense emotional need to cope. And that's often where the most out of control feeling is with this perfect storm. And it's there too, if it's just the physical or if it's just the emotional, but it's definitely the hardest when you have those two sides playing into it, like you just said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like it's heightened by both of them being together.
Mm-hmm.
I also remember in those moments not trusting that I really was hungry, because there was a sense of wanting to deny that could be a part of it at all, that like maybe I do actually need to eat, So it took a while to sort of recognize this feeling that I'm hungry, and I'm sort of trying to talk myself out of it by saying like, oh, but it's really about this. It's like, no, but actually both, like it, and it's okay to be hungry. It's okay to have a biological need for food. We're wired that way, but I think when you spend years in disordered eating, hunger becomes something to fear and to deny. It's like, I'm not hungry. I wasn't hungry when I did that. I was just emotional. And it's right. Somehow easier to make it just about the emotions, right?
Right. I think that when you go through years of autopilot dieting, I don't think I ever even thought about the word hunger unless I was like, oh, it's dinner time, or it's lunchtime. The bell rang, let's go eat lunch. I'm hungry. But like after the school years and into college and you're in early adulthood, there's no structure like that. There's no schedule. It's just, for me, it was all about, am I allowed to eat or am I not allowed to eat? Should I or shouldn't I? Is this healthy enough or not? And it was never, ever about hunger.
That's so interesting. Yeah, it really just gets pushed to the side, the real biological need, because diets tell you when to eat, how to eat, what to eat. Like there's no room. I mean, I think the diets that are masquerading as not diets that happen today, like maybe there's a little room for it in those kinds of diets, but most diets are pretty clear on like, this is what you get to eat. These are the forbidden foods. This is timing of it, and you can't deviate from those times. Yep, these are the rules. If you're on some diet that prohibits you from eating a certain type of food and you have a craving, quote unquote, for that food, you got to manage your cravings. You got to not give in to that. And here are all these tips and tricks. And then it gets into like, well, we've got to decode your craving for that. And what does it really mean? Oh, you're addicted to sugar. Oh, you're emotional and you're using it for comfort. And like, not that we're actually meant to have a variety of foods available, and that if you gave yourself permission to eat that food, it would probably be just fine.
I know, just no freedom at all. I actually like the way that I open up my book, The Savvy Girl Guide to Eating, which is based on the intuitive eating philosophy. The way I open it up is with this memory that I have of walking into Cold Stone Creamery, which is an ice cream shop. Mm-hmm. So this particular memory happened after I had a boyfriend who lived in another state, and he had just been visiting for 3 or 4 days, and he had just flown out that morning. I took him to the airport, and I was on my way back to my apartment from the airport, and I was starving because I hadn't eaten for 4 days because I wouldn't, I ate, but not enough, just absolutely not enough food that I was hungry for. And so I would always feel this intense, insatiable hunger when I was alone, right? After being with friends or after being with boyfriends or people or whoever it was. It was like once I was alone, I could finally eat. And so this memory of walking into Cold Stone at 10:30 in the morning or something after dropping him off at the airport. And I just wanted this ginormous ice cream sundae, and I ate it. And I remember going in and I got it, and I ate it in my car because I was so ashamed. I didn't want to have anyone see me, of course. And I just remember feeling so sick to my stomach afterwards, and coming home and just kind of crawling into bed, and just knowing that there was something wrong with that, and that I didn't need to be eating it that way, but not knowing what else to do. You can follow it with restriction, get back on the diet, don't have any more ice cream, but that wasn't doing anything. So it was just this I feel like that kind of defines what my relationship to food looked like from so many years, was not eating with people and then binging alone.
Yeah. Me too. That's very similar to how it was for me, because you can sort of distract yourself from your feelings, right? You can distract yourself from hunger when you're with people. And I've always had a little bit of social anxiety, or just kind of I get hyped up when I'm around people, and I don't necessarily tune into my own body and my own needs as much. And that was a convenient way to avoid the real feelings of hunger that were there. And so then, I was demonizing myself for eating alone and binging alone, and feeling well, I can't be left alone. Clearly, if you leave me alone with food, it's going to disappear because I'm the worst, rather than, no, actually, there's very obvious explanations for that, you're not bad, and it's actually your body just trying to get what it needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the piece that really again, what nutrition students are being taught is that there's a formula for this, and there's a number of calories that we can assign to every person that should be able to fulfill these needs, but that's just not a reflection of reality. And so I guess that's just something that really, it's an issue that I know a lot of us want to talk about and inform people about, and help not just new students or dietitians, but really the public about these formulas and these calories. This doesn't necessarily fit how your life looks, and we can't eat according to a formula.
Totally. Yeah. Well, I think that's a good segue too into this project that you're doing, putting on a conference for dietitians and really all health professionals, right? Or even members of the public to help them learn about eating disorders and intuitive eating and kind of break down some of the myths that we're taught as nutrition students or professionals to help people have a better understanding of what they're going to see in practice when people come in with these issues and things that people might not even be telling them, right?
Yes, exactly. I'm so excited about, so it's called EDRD Pro Symposium. And it really is for either dietitians who are already interested or practicing in treating eating disorders, or dietetic students who have an interest to go into nutrition counseling, really of any kind. And the reason I think it's so important that all nutritionists learn about intuitive eating and health at every size and the non-diet approach is because we know for fact that a certain percentage of any people coming in for nutrition counseling are going to be experiencing disordered eating or have eating disorders.
Yeah.
And so really it is, I believe, our duty in our profession to at least have the skills and the information and the tools to know how to assess for or to treat disordered eating, because we know it's there and there's no one who's doing this kind of work that's not going to be exposed to it.
Absolutely. That's such an important message. And I'm loving that you're going to do this because, as I'm always saying that too, like that, as many as 75% of women, at least according to some research, have disordered eating or an eating disorder. And when you think about that, even if you're in a practice that deals with diabetes or, food allergies or something like that, 75% of the people, the women walking through your door might have some kind of issue with food. And often they aren't telling you about it, or they aren't aware enough about it to even think it's a problem, but it might just be there. And to know how to effectively screen for it and to give advice and nutrition counseling that doesn't exacerbate it, but that might actually help the person, even if they don't know they need help in that direction, I think is so important for our profession.
Exactly. So I'm employed as a full-time dietitian here in Oregon. I work at a GI specialty clinic. So I'm one of two dietitians. And so I actually did a little experiment just to see what my new patients in February looked like as far as prevalence of eating disorders. So very few of my patients are actually referred for eating disorder treatment. They're referred for other reasons. So I have a specialty in GI health as well as eating disorders. But I approach each and every patient from a health at every size non-diet approach with all of my counseling. So I just took a little snapshot of what February looked like. And I found that of all the new patients I saw in February, 54% were significant disordered eating or eating disorders. And these are not even people who are being referred for disordered eating.
Wow. That is huge. So more than half of your patients.
Mm-hmm. So it's a very, very big deal. And as we know, as you and I have both experienced, but we know also from working with people that this is not something people are talking about. And so they're experiencing it with a lot of shame, with a lot of confusion, with a lot of hidden pain, which is then, affecting all areas of their life and their well-being.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think in this healthist society that we live in now, it's only getting worse because people can be sort of routed into like elimination diets or clean eating or these things that hold out a promise to like fix your digestive health and heal your gut and things like that, where maybe the gut issues, and I'm sure you've experienced this, and seen this in your practice, that, the gut issues a lot of people have are related to how they're eating or related to the restrict binge cycle or restricting and binging or binging and purging or whatever they might be doing with food that's causing significant distress to their gut. But rather than talking about those underlying causes, it's like, oh, what foods can you cut out to address this GI distress?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think a lot of people come into me, unknowingly thinking that that's what's about to happen and are pleasantly surprised, but also really awakened by the conversations that we have. And it's just really amazing. I feel fortunate to have the background in intuitive eating and eating disorder training that I do in order to work with this population, because I think it's a really vulnerable population for eating disorders, but as is, everyone here in a westernized culture. So yeah, I'm really excited to be producing the EDRD Pro Symposium. Registration opens March 20th and it's open through April 25th. So again, that's ideally for dietitians or nutritionists, but really could be amazingly useful information for any health coach or wellness coach. And we're going to have one day of the 4-day conference that's not specific to dietitians. So that'll be a different registration price, but people can opt to just register for this one day to get some of this health at every size acceptance, non-diet approach philosophy education if they don't want to do all 4 days for the nutrition track.
That's so wonderful, because it is, I think, something that all health professions need to understand. And I get a lot of people asking, like, I'm a physician or I'm a health coach or whatever, like, what can I do to increase my knowledge about health at every size? So it's nice to have that opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're so excited that you're going to be doing one of our 15 talks for the symposium. So
yes, I'm so excited to be a part of it and to be in such amazing company. I mean, some of the other speakers, I'm just so honored to be alongside them.
Yeah, so we have Elise Resch and Leslie Schilling and Marcy Evans and Rebecca Scritchfield and Fiona Sutherland and just Carolyn Costin. I mean, I could go on and on with everyone, but all 15 speakers are up on our registration page of the website, so people can go there and check it out and see what they'll get for the entire 4 days.
Yes, I'm so excited. I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes for this episode and on the website, on my website as well, so people can find that easily. And yeah, I'm so excited for that. And then tell us a little bit more about your book and where people can find out more about that.
Sure. So I decided to partner with a former client of mine. Her name's Brittany Deal. And we wrote the book back about 3 years ago now, a little over 3 years. And the purpose really of why I wanted this book to be what it is that I was working with a lot of like teens and young women who, we were working towards intuitive eating and learning intuitive eating, but really they weren't that into reading the entire book or really reading the book Intuitive Eating, which that's kind of maybe the age group that
yeah, feels like homework.
I wanted to have a resource that would really resonate with a younger population it's a much faster read. It's called Savvy Girl, A Guide to Eating. It's available on Amazon, but it's a 4 to 5 hour read. It's got some really pretty images in it, some nice tools and techniques and little assignments that people can do to help learn more about their relationship to food and get better attuned to their body's signals. The tone and the language is just a little bit different from intuitive eating, but Elise Resch did review it with me and work on it with me to make sure that it really fit everything that it needed to be to stay in line with the intuitive eating philosophy.
That's so cool. I think that's such a powerful resource to have because, yeah, teens are sort of a different audience and might not resonate with the full book. And, it might be sort of feel more geared towards grownups. So having something that's an easier read that's really targeted is super helpful.
Yeah. And then at the same time, I've had, a number of grown men and women of all ages read the book and really, it just resonates. It's it's the experience that people are reading about and learning about. And if anyone has this troubled relationship to food, you connect with it. It's just you either do or you don't. And so it doesn't matter if you're a 17-year-old girl or a 60-year-old man, it's the same. And so I would encourage that it's not just for young women, but it is kind of geared towards that population.
It's probably a helpful intro for people too, who don't know about intuitive eating yet, but want to get sort of an overview, or people who've read the book maybe and want a new perspective on it.
Yes, I think it is actually a really good intro to intuitive eating. I just got an email from someone I worked with down in LA, and she said that her client just finished Savvy Girl book and immediately is gobbling up intuitive eating now. And that's exactly what I want people to do.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think we need more entry points into this world, because sometimes, people aren't ready to hear or aren't seeking out a book that's specifically anti-diet, or they don't know what the concept intuitive eating even means, so it's finding ways to bring them into the fold and bring them into this world that are resonant with where they're at now.
Right. And then the book's kind of fun too, because it has both the perspective from Brittany, my former client, and what her experience was in making this shift in her life. And then it also has my voice in it, kind of being the kind of directing the tools and the techniques and the process. So get both perspectives.
I love that. So do you have a website for the book, or where can people find that?
They can go just directly to Amazon and search Savvy Girl Eating, and they'll see it there.
Love it. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes too, so people can find it quickly.
Great. And they'll also see the book and the link to Amazon on my website, which is eat2livehappy.com.
Awesome. Yeah, I was just going to say, where can people kind of connect with you and learn more about your work?
Yeah. Eat2livehappy.com is where EDRD Pro Symposium lives, as well as links to the Savvy Girl book.
I love it. Well, great. I will put a link to that in the show notes as well, so people can get more information about you and connect with you if they want. Well, that's so great. I'm really excited to share that with people, and honored to be a part of it. So, and thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing your story. This is wonderful.
Oh my gosh. Thanks so much for having me. I love everything that you're doing for our field. And this podcast is amazing. And I think you're doing just really wonderful things with how you're spreading the word.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. So that's our show. Thanks again so much to our guests for being here, and to you guys for listening. And we'll be back again next week with another brand new episode. Meanwhile, I'd love to stay in touch, and the best way to do that is via email. So you can go to christyharrison.com/email to sign up for my VIP list. I'll send you info about new episodes of the podcast as they drop, as well as exclusive sneak previews of new episodes, giveaways and other special deals on the products and services I offer, special tips on how to make peace with food and learn to trust your body, and a whole lot more. Sign up at christyharrison.com/email. You can also subscribe via iTunes and leave us a nice rating and review, which is a great way to get the word out about the podcast and help other people find these important messages. Just go to iTunes from your computer or your podcasts app, type in Food Psych to the search bar, click on the result that comes up under podcasts, and then click on ratings and reviews, and you can leave a rating and review right there. And I really appreciate all the 5-star reviews and wonderful ratings that we've gotten, because it's helped us climb really high right now in the rankings. And that's really cool, because we're competing against some of the weight management and body shaming types of messages that I'm trying to fight with this podcast. So we've really started to beat out a lot of the diety voices, and I'd love to continue climbing higher in the rankings to get this message out even further. So please leave us a nice rating and review. It's so very much appreciated. And thanks to everyone who's left reviews so far. The music you're hearing behind me now is by a band called AWOL, and the track is called Food, used under the Creative Commons license. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, stay psyched.
Stupid or scared, no work in the kitchen now. Who put you there in that perfect position now? Bullies want your food, and you ain't really beat. Have you ever went over your friend's house?